Okay, today we're going to look at another site that's one of the complex of sites that surround Gobekli Tepe and become known as Tas Tepellier, which is a whole complex of sites again ranging all across this area, pretty much in this little circle right here overlooking this valley, which may have contained quite a few, but that's changed long ago. In fact, luckily, these things were buried under a little mound to the point that it wasn't real good farmland, although surrounding it was, and these became little trapped pockets. And this is kind of what this one was. And it was kind of known, but nobody knew that some little hump like this could contain so much information and show so much. Even Gobekli Tepe itself, people looked at as being like a Muslim site or something because there was a couple of rocks that were kind of worked, that were exposed. And the man that opened up that, Schmidt, that opened up that site, had just dealt with a site that was way back in antiquity, and he had seen work that looked the same way and said, I want to take a look at that. And now we have a whole different outlook on the way humanity was. Although a lot of people, myself involved, kept talking about they're going to be showing something someday that's in between these dates of some cave art, which is real sparse, showing you that they really weren't cave dwellers, other than like post holes, which they can't really date, and things like that, which shows you they were building out of wood long, long ago. But they would find one day something that comes before the Sumerians or Egyptians, because it really seems like those sites pretty much came up like popcorn. And through the studies and a lot of videos I've shown, you can tell that that isn't exactly the way it happened. In fact, we're looking at these sites here, finding these Stonehenge type buildings hooked up already to archaeoastronomy and things like that. And it dates back to the end of the last ice age, over doubling the date that we were going with before. And strangely, people were already looking at Sumeria and Egypt and talking about what they knew, and it just seems like they come out of nowhere. It's so amazing. People to this day keep trying to inflect that there must have been aliens and something that came down and helped them because kaboom. Well, we'll show a little of that kaboom starting way before it, and how it's not necessarily new. It's just the giant megalithic structures weren't really being built as much, or you wouldn't think that they would. But you look at Gobekli Tepe, and it's got what they deem as 35 to 50 Stonehenge rings that are around it. And sure, they're a little smaller, but also they're carved with animals and all kinds of effects using a bas relief type effect, and it's quite amazing. Out of the group of these sites, as each one shows new information, I'll try to come out and show it with you. And sometimes I jump the gun a little bit on some of these because afterwards comes out more information, more pictures and things like that. And then you go, man, if I'd have just waited 6 weeks, it would be like this. But you can imagine I get overexcited. What we're looking at here is that fertile crescent idea, and we're just looking at the middle point of that fertile crescent. And I tell you now, the green areas that you see all around in the top left and up there around the Caucasus Mountain Range and stuff, and areas that we call Georgia and Armenia today and so on. To the right of that's a freshwater lake, but to the left of it also is a freshwater lake. And the green that you see now, at or before the time of writing and so on, used to all be pretty much this green with an area fading down out of our picture right here and to your right a little bit, and it just swaths out. And then due to the way it all worked out and climate change way before, oh, that word, and it just wiped this place away, and the great cedar forest of Lebanon and so on are a sparse point of what they used to be. But looking at that Black Sea area, do you see that brighter areas at the top of it and a ring around it? And whenever you look at things like that, you realize that that's real shallow water and then deeper water. Well, if you look around the edge of it, and I know it's kind of hard to in this picture image that's shown here, but whenever you look at it, it shows little veins running into it, and that's because this area used to be much more shallow, even more shallow than the dark blue area that you see there, And after the end of the last ice age, when all this melt came into the area below and to the left of it, into the Mediterranean, which means Middle Earth to these people of that time, and it's still kept to this day, it broke through right over here at Budapest, or Istanbul, I'm sorry, and it, what we call that today, and whenever it did so, it filled up that area and flooded it. And there's a whole lot of beliefs that that, or the whole world, the way that it rose up so quickly, was kept by some people as being a flood myth, and then they for thousands of years developed this thing that it was going to never happen again. And of course, devastation by fire had already happened too, and so on. And we look at the Younger Dryas event, all of these type of effects. But those whole areas there used to be much more shallow. In fact, the Black Sea used to be freshwater, and it got rapidly flipped over, and it ruined the ecology there for thousands of years, by the way, due to the mixing. And you notice it doesn't have much in and out there or through, and so effectively what we're looking at is an area that took a long time with gorging and purging with the rest of the Mediterranean in and out as per tides and things like that, and the natural flow of things and mixing, that it actually came about to be a saltwater sea. In fact, the whole area there is known as anoxic, and if you get below a certain level of water, everything has such a low oxygen level that boats and things that are there don't really rot away quick. And there's been archaeologists that have looked through that and so on, and it's been pretty neat to see some of the finds that they have there. But also Robert Ballard, famous for finding the Titanic and stuff, was actually down here in Cyprus, and he was looking down in here for something, and in doing so, on that secondary shelf, not the lighter blue shelf, but the secondary shelf, he found a crop circle that's there, and it would have had to have been made, before that Younger Dryas event, something like 12.6, 12.8, 14,000 years ago. And we find it was starting to melt back from there, so you can get a dating on when there was this big circle that was there, along with a lot of other those type of astronomical circles that are found in these areas. But let's try to take a look at this place here if we can, and we'll see where we're at here as we go in. But also I want to look at the Fertile Crescent concept that goes along with this. So whenever you see this, it's showing the Fertile Crescent, but if you'll look at it, we're looking at something that goes all the way down to Jericho and all of the Levant area, but it doesn't include Egypt at this time, does it? No, but there's a site marked right down there at the edge known as El Khab and so on. But it really involves all the way up here in this swooping little arc that's right here. But that arc is fed off of being real close to the Mediterranean, and then also hooked up to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. But if you'll look at this, they're not referring to the Tigris and Euphrates in this concept here that went on before, that the Sumerians showed up like popcorn because some of these people migrated into that area and took everything they had with what they had before and kicked it up a notch. We're going to find more archaeological sites that deal with this than the 12 or 11, I think it is, that we're looking at now with the Tas Tepellier site. But if you look at the top part of that arch right there, you can see all these places like Navala Kore, of course Gobekli Tepe that's there, in the little black spot that's there. But all of these places I'm talking about are there, and just within a few thousand years, there's already archaeology showing all of this in this sweep that runs over here that used to be going on, including Catalhoyuk to the top left corner there, that's actually in Asia Minor, all the way down to what we say is Jericho, and then of course Zarabar, Ganjdera, and Alakash that are showing on the far right hand corner as a sweep down. But also that Persian Gulf has some things hooked up with it that are not showing right now on it, and so you'd have to go a little deeper. But we're kind of concentrated on this area, and these people came from that, and then those people spread and went on into the other areas. And Some over to the right went farther to the right. Some of them went down in. Some of the guys to the left went down and farther in. Some of these guys at the top part also preemptive to, and at this point actually went north, and there are passes through the Caucasus Mountains and so on. But one site that's important when we talk about all this, and Gobekli Tepe and the era of this cataclysm that happened at the Younger Dryas event, is right in here. And what we're looking at is Abu Huraira. For we talk about this, and we don't know, there may have been just a couple or a few, or we're not sure at this point, of these cometary / meteor slush fragments that came into the air up over that way. But the Earth is a ball, so as it was spinning slowly, just like looking at it whenever the Shoemaker-Levy comet came in, as they were coming in just behind each other, as the planet's spinning, it starts hitting it here and here and here and here and here. And so the farthest eastern point that we see of this happening is Abu Huraira, which comes about that same time, shows the diamonds and things like that. But we also have mark of a couple of places at this point back over up this area and that way that show it. And then of course in Iceland and Hiawatha Crater, and then in North America, the large abundance there, and this showing you that a lot of it happened right there. The real important one happened there. But the reason it was even so much more devastating is it was here, and there, boom, and maybe a little bit more. Maybe we don't know the extent of it just yet. But Abu Huraira has an idea like that, Finger of God came down and just went zorf and took it off the planet. Just said, wipe. And you get a lot of stories from people that happen like that, but at this point, we're preemptive to the Proto-Sumerians, if you will, but there's already all these things going on. And so let's take a look at some of this and some of the information that it shows with a picture display that's been done by Blad9VT. He's the comrade there that's living actually in the UK right now. And you hope everything goes well with him with things like that. But this is basically showing you that this place is at. And if you look right there in the center at that red teardrop, that's Kortic Tepe. And the closest little civilization that's got a name next to it is Batman. I thought that was cool. If you've been watching my videos, then you've probably seen whenever I talked about this not too long ago, and kind of the mention of like, yeah, we found Gobekli Tepe, but there's all these other places, and there's this thing that's here, there's this thing that's there. Even showed whenever, oh God, what's his name now? Don't let me forget. But the guy that made a whole lot of videos that passed away last year and stuff, and he had shown a couple of sites that were around there too. And because he was trying to look around it whenever he was doing his studies into the shroud. But funny how these places are actually thousands and thousands of years before any little shroud type concept. But hey, there's Batman. And so we're right there near that. In fact, it's just over here to the right, and there's this farmland, and of course in the farmland there ends up being these places that just really can't be done, that they find that there's all this stonework and things like that. I don't know if you can see it right over here in the corner and just out of frame there, but there are lines of rocks that are there too. Just get a couple hundred yards up above it here and you can see it. But of course this is started with the excavation and so on, and they've already realized that people have got in here and picked stones out to end up making some of the places in a much later date that are just over here to the left and to the bottom. But also this farmland wasn't really usable. There's just too many rocks in between a healthy place to be able to grow it at. So they had to be way over here to the right, way up north, way over here, and they couldn't be at this spot. Here's this little hump. Well, it doesn't really grow much grass in it and stuff. And once they started excavating, and of course it shows up to be something quite different. And if you'll look, it's got an extremely planned grid project set out here. It's planned that's set up here. Some major walls, in fact one running right through it almost in the middle and then tapering off to the left, showing a a separation, and also looks like it's through time and so on. But right there at the bottom of your screen, and cutting through the bottom right and then cutting through the bottom left, eventually over there is this road that goes around it too. No telling how many people have walked by this. Somebody said that there's an ancient tale from some of the people that live there that you don't go walking around on there because there's like ghosts and bad things, and you just don't mess with that. Perhaps they learned lessons sometimes before by running into things, but also that might be to keep people away, because this looks like it was looted somewhat, and they still found an incredible array of artifacts, which we're going to look at here coming up. Again, this is just one of those sites that's among that we were looking at. And some of these archaeological sites, whenever we look at them, redate so many things. And it's funny that it doesn't get told. It's not readily out there, and nobody's putting it out on the news like crazy because it doesn't fit the agenda. But we've looked at recently where somebody told us that concrete was developed by the Romans or something, and we can look at it, and really if we give a broader sense of concrete, we have this incredible plaster that lasts forever out of the Egyptians. But we've also seen a place that dates to about 7000 BC that had a concrete floor on it, and it had red and white where they mixed the colors in and made it all decked out. I forget the name off the top of my head, but I have 2 videos on it. And because I did a video, and then eventually somebody else did another video, and they had 4 or 5 other pictures and what some of the guys had said about it that I did not have at the time because I jumped the gun again. Again, I talked about this site before, but I haven't gone real deep into it. But we're going to look at some of the stuff that goes along with this. But these sites redate things. In fact, some of the sites that we've looked at, 2 of which I have a terrazzo type concrete floor that's in them. And so that really starts to get you thinking. Well, strangely about these sites, what gets you thinking and shows you that everything's a little more different than what you think, because before pottery, you know, you're led to believe that pottery happened and then stonework happens, right? And so there's the whole thing, and the 3 little pigs, and they start out with twigs and then go to, you know, bricks eventually and so on off of it. But when we find that, bricks have been around since the Sumerians, and that was like a magic thing where somebody turns mud into stone, like some kind of magical thing. But this place is a pre-pottery or pre-clay pottery, Neolithic, but it already has stonework, and they've made a term for this because it threw everything on their ear in a few different ways too, which is amazing. So you can see the site that's being worked here, but you can also see that it's pinched in just above, and man, it's just out of shot here. But on the left-hand side, there's another little railing, and they're farming right on the other side of that, and that road comes in over here. So it's been pinched in over time, and it never was as big of a hill or so on. But this whole area is pretty huge, but it used to encompass an area a little bigger than what's shown here because it's all been encroached upon. And it predates things, along with these other 11 sites so far. There are these pillar sets that are in here that don't really show the T-pillars, and it may be actually what we think of as something that this was before they decided to use the pillars to do the middle parts and the stand-ups in between, because all else is here. And of course, they're right in the middle of all this and predating this. So where it would have come about and switched from them using up a large amount of timbers to using stone and things that have effigies and so on those on the inside part of it to stand it up, to make the center part of the Stonehenge, if you will, or things along that nature. But again, this predates Stonehenge by double the date away from the time that we are now, which is amazing. You see these little rounded pillars too, and somebody made the comment that if you were to stack those up, that would just look like a Roman column that's not worked, but there's so much erosion on them, we can't give credit for things like that. But there are hearths that are hooked up with this, like over here in the corner, and areas that are showing up that they've set up, floors to where it is bedrock, but they have taken this down to where it's flat. and or have concrete poured floors in them that made it from its uneven state back to even more smoother than what it is. You can imagine they probably had animal skins and stuff laying on it at one time and all kinds of stuff, and this raised dais up here could be where somebody slept, or it could be just where they actually don't have been excavated down to the point below that right now. It could just be a plateau sitting there where they're going level to level, year to year. But you can see how the depth that they've had to go here in the background, which is more than 20 foot. And of course, during these excavations, amulets and idols of unknown creatures kept getting formed here, showing you some time from before. I've shown you things that from the Jiroft culture and others that have this same similar drilling that goes on below them. Sheldon always wants to photobomb. And these holes that are drilled into them, where you would think maybe people came up with a way to start fire and drilling holes. No, these people drilled incredible holes. In fact, we're going to look at stoneware, where they make something that if you look at it, you're going to go, that's pottery, right? No, it's made out of stone, and it's less than a quarter-inch thick, and a lot of them all the way through and how they worked, and we'll talk about that. But one of the important ones that we see here is this effigy that's in the center of it, because they have found a bunch of these. And what is this thing? Well, it looks like it has antennas, and it seems to be some kind of insect. And people have made comments to where it looks like it has stars on its tail and this, that, and the other. But whenever you look at the one on the left and the one on the right, there's not a constellation or anything built in, or even a similar exact number. But if the one on the right, you look at it, how they double did a couple of those. That's brighter than dimmer. Is this an ancient zodiac that they have going on? What's going on? Other people made the comment that this could be a glowworm. This could be a lightning type bug. And for some reason, people go off that. You know, it becomes something that you only see for a season there, for a short period of time whenever they come out. Could that be a signification they go off of? Other people say, you know, this is what this is a wasp. And that little poisony, they spent the time extra right there to let you know there's something going on. You see that little point there at the end of it. Well, there are wasps that are deified all the way through, and even in the time of the Bible. I mean, Vespasian, Vespa actually means wasp. And they're in the Old Testament, they tell you that a wasp came through and cleared them out, that God let loose a wasp. And you think, how would one wasp be able to do what you just said that it happened? It's kind of an odd story, but I don't want to get off into religion and things now. We're way, way, way before that concept. But these people already have somewhat of religion, but not like they're sacrificing to a wasp or lightning bugs or anything, but they have this symbology that's all attached onto it. And you can see that, and these weird symbologies of these people's heads and so on, like you see right here, and how it's wobbed on both sides. A lot of people say that's just giving, you know, they're not trying to have faces necessarily, but it's just the wob of both sides. But we've seen that type of effigy. A lot of people keep saying, oh, those are aliens or something, right? Just because they don't draw them exactly like people. And then, of course, animistic type interpretations that people see. They also say, oh, the aliens come down and they ended up making cow people, and you know, and all kinds of things in your mind, rather than going with the concept of how it was really working out. Strange thing is, though, on its chest, it shows you something that would look like a sun symbology going on. But also, somebody made the comment that there are the center and then two rings, the third ring, which is usually evident in it, like the one on the far left, could be containing the idea that they already know that two planets are closer than us to the sun, but two planets are farther away. The thing that kind of blows that is there's a few others, like the one with the wobbly head right here in the darker stone, that shows that there's only two rings. Well, if that was the sun and the two for us, that's the two that are before us. What people don't give credit for here is it looks like there's almost cuneiform type writing going down on the left below the hand and the right below the hand. And what is this? Is just some symbology? Is this Aquarius in something where the water's coming and pouring out like the way that it looks? A lot of connections we could give to that. In fact, just out the screen to the right is a 3-star symbology to hooked up together, and a lot of people would say, oh, that's Orion. So are things connected to it? And of course, we're going back so prehistoric, or anybody having enough writing or symbology like this to go with it, that people are just making conjecture at this point. It seems to be somewhat trying to put together pieces of a puzzle. And if you look, a lot of these are broken up. Like the one in the middle, you just find that there's apparently a man, but it's only got half of his body. And to show you that they infilled this whole place, they have found all the other chunks, and there's not the top half of his body on this thing right here. Like somehow that did not go into the pile, or that they found so far. They might someday, but if it was broken like and together, then it would be have already been found, right? So if they find it way over here, then that shows you they were using stuff for fill and even breaking up all their stuff and things like that. Like it's been shown at a few other sites. Over here at the right looks confusing. Here's this star sun symbology and this other symbol that looks like some kind of flying creature with an antenna. Over on the far left is drill holes, which look great, but then it's hooked up to an antelope or an ibex, this horned type, not a deer. It's one set of straight horns that are hooked back. Perhaps even a ram, but doesn't look thicker, but it's something along that. It's a unguent. So let's see here. When you look through these people, though, the thing that's here is that you think, well, they're working with clay and made these things, or are they even smart enough to fire them and stuff? Well, no, actually, this is before pottery for these people. They've got an amazing thing going on, but not pottery. Now, you find other people that end up doing pottery because they live right around clay like crazy, and they came up with this portable throwaway stuff rather than something that you have to cherish, which we're about to look at other stonework. But if you look, these are bas-reliefed to where they're standing up. And so somebody kind of pecked out and drew on this larger rock this picture and then took all the other rock away. It's an incredible thing. And when you find it in the Sumerians and Egyptians and other places, they're like, that's going out of their way to make it look 3D like this. Because if you were just going to peck it in a rock, you would just peck the picture in and that's all you would have. Right? Then the cylinder seals are pecked reverse of what I just said, or what we're looking at now. So whenever you roll them out, it pulls the stuff up in and makes those pictures that come out in clay. But that goes with clay. So a few of these people had a few different things going on, and once you put A, B, and C together, then all of a sudden the alphabet comes about, but it doesn't work even that easy for us to talk about. But again, here's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different pictures of wasps. And they have that starry configuration on them. And then all these people configurations have this sun symbology that's onto them. Here's this Orion thing and stuff like that that's left. So the pictures we've been looking at. God, I'm already at 27 minutes of rambling about things. But I guess I want to give you a picture of where we're at, what we're doing, what we're talking about, and get a little more of the flavor. But you can see these different pictures here where it's been shown from a little different angles onto them. But again, that bas-relief, where they took off all the area around it and so on. So now let's look at some pottery that's here. And you see these cross symbols, but the cross top has a little hook that's on it, right? And over to the right looks like a man, like here. There's a man that is extremely tall and looks like a stick creature or has a ladder hooked up to him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Wow, it's like 26 lines, so it doesn't even fit with a lunar calendar unless you're figuring that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, oh, that works perfect. Well, regardless of that, they talk about how this guy had feathers on his head, or they ended up having some type of antenna. Of course, that goes with the alien thing. Here's a snake that's over here too, and it's symbology too, but it zigzags, and it's that pattern that we come familiar with. And if I was to tell you this was something found in the parts of South America through Incas and so on, you'd be like, yeah, something like that. Yeah, okay. And funny thing is, no, this is back in the old world. Now you see that hooked eagle-headed stance that's on the cross, right? But if we were to do that on every appendage that's there and walk like an Egyptian and put that forward hand that's, well, like here, and put it with a hook that's going down, and then put the feet going that way, going down, and the other hand poking up where this one's going down, we'd have that swab picture thing, well, you know about. And here's a double dotted spot too that's going on right up here. So you think, oh, that's cool. How do they make this? Well, they actually take this stone and they rub it down with other elements, and then they cook it. Whenever they do, it turns it black. But then they carve into it, and it carves it back into the stone with more of a fresh peck and through that black layer, and you get a picture like this. And this can be seen all the way through the time of the Greeks, where they're even doing it with pottery, where they put stuff on it and then cook it where it's black and red spots and so on, and then they scratch back through it and you get that third color going on, or the outline of things and so on like that. But this seems to predate it in somewhat, that concept. But again, that scratch through kind of double picture there that's given by using colors and then scratching through can be seen all the way through that time. Again, here's that centipede man or whatever, but he sure is tall and skinny. And you talk about a six-pack, this man has a 20 six-pack. And other vases have been shown here where it's symbology where there's a lizard that's there, but then there's other snakes. And some of these things show this lizard snake, which is right there, and then small little lizards. And so that concept and the concept of snakes and things like that is well known with it. This one here that we'll see a closer picture at above it, which looks almost like a bug or a crab walking to the right, is actually two of those ibex antelope kind of situation things. And here it is again on the left, drawn with a scratchy picture-esque type thing. And somehow that reminds me of the Cucuteni Triptyllian culture stuff, but this is thousands of years before it. But it's probably has connections to that in an eventual way. All these, by the way, none of this is pottery. All of this is stonework, which has been carved out to be real thin, like those things that we find in the Egyptians at the very first dynasty. And it seems like everybody gave up their stuff as some effigy to some person that was deified. There's 40,000 pieces of it or whatever they found, and everybody marvels on it and says, oh, they must have had a lathe and all this. Got other videos that show you how these things are made. In fact, a group of people are making them in a modern day, right there in front of you. I think it's called Science versus Myths or something like that. But they do the hole drilling and this, that, and the other and so on. They can't get it to drill through as fast as they did, but they make a shorter work of it than anybody that did before, because these people know what the hell they're doing, and they practiced a few times and got it down and then got it better, rather than trying one time and then giving up and then going, I got about 2 millimeters into this stone. And they go, okay, so this stone is going to be cut in half, right? So how long would it take you to saw, as you're doing right now, if kept up at that same level, to make it all the way through cleanly? And they go, about 40 something weeks. Oh, so 3/4 of a year for this one stone. So if the pyramid was all built in 20 years, 20,000, or in 20 years, 20,000 people working on it, how can you divide that into it and end up with the amount of stones that they have there, unless they were, a majority of them were pre-cut somehow and used for something else, which may look like the pyramids they never finished somehow, some places, and they nabbed the blocks from there. Just one thought on that, man. I'm going to go ahead and get off that and keep going here. But so this pattern of using the dark and light and actually darkening the stone and making a huge contrast so it shows up real good has been shown a lot of places. In fact, there are places where this has been shown where soot has been used on cave walls, and this same type of effect has been used somewhat. But if you look to your right there in the right bottom corner, what you kind of see right there is a lizard, and that lizard right here thing has 1, 6, 8. That's got to be some kind of insect, and it's checkerboarded on its back, but it ends up having like 8 legs. Pretty crazy. And then there's a snake, and then there's that one that's right over here, and that ends up having a diamond jester type pattern on it, a geometric pattern that's on it too. And then that geometric pattern drawing always reminds me of the Triptyllian type culture and the things that are shown with it, because it was well known, and they even show people that are made out like that, showing a coloring during that time that they did to their bodies. And here we go. That reminds me of, oh, how about Conan the Barbarian, and well, the version of the Destroyer that they had in the movie, where he ended up putting the black stripes all over his body, and it Kind of looks like a camouflage kind of situation, but also might harken back to a concept like that people put on. Sure, it's really more of a camouflage so he can get into that place. Well, why doesn't he just cover it all the way with soot? Well, some light spots. It breaks up his form. There's all these things you could say, but let's just continue. So all of these pieces here are all made out of stone. Here's again that third planet from the sun, if you will, and all these symbologies that go along with it. And here it is, and here it is, and here it is. But it's on an animal that's here too, with a double ring thing. And people have said, well, from other depictions, that means that that's a brighter star than this one. And actually the depth of the hole there also makes a declamation of how bright it is. The deeper the hole, the brighter it is. So how big of a stick would you put into it? It's not size-wise, it's depth, which is another cool but weird thing, whether people are keeping up with something like that. But then this star also would not mean just the brighter star that's there, but also it would be the one that they call the heart of the animal, if you will, or the zodiacal sign, to where that's the main one, it's alpha to it, and it goes on with it, much like Aldebaran and the bullseye that goes along with Taurus and things like that. But here's this swirly type effect, and you can see here that a very thin sheet of stone was kept to do that. Again, here we have these wasp type things, and they've all got the stars on them, but this one only has that central heart star. So was this actually some type of zodiacal sign that had to go with the wasp? Well, there is a thing later that goes back with it, but we can't say that's got to be that. These people worshiping wasp, well, maybe they have this beehive concept going on and thoughts that go along with that they are going with, where they're not necessarily worshiping it, they're leading humanity by example and saying things like this. But are people running around and trying to check out wasps and building their houses, or what's going on off of that? I mean, there can be a mile of conjecture. I'm not going to get into at this point, but let's look at some more stuff. For again, I'm telling you, this is all stonework, and most of these are cleaved out little bitty flat pieces of stone, and then they've been bas relief to this point. But there are other depictions that they have that are other than these wasps. But strange thing is, there's just hundreds of those. Again, here we have those pillar bottoms or whatever that look like here, and they could of course had wood holding it up. They're sitting on the pillar bottoms or something like that. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways that you could figure that out. And you can see this place where it's about 20 foot deep and so on. So I don't know the connections they have to that. And of course, whoever collected these pictures saw that there was a bunch of pictures of wasps, and I don't think it was just one of each one of them, but they have groups of them and so on. But here's something that's important. For here's all this, and you'd look at all this and you'd go, well, there's a bunch of mace heads on the left, and there's a bunch of pottery stuff on the right. Well, no, everything you're looking at is made out of stonework. So it redates the Neolithic, the new Stone Age, where people started doing great things with stone, by pretty much thousands of years. Although we have found small pieces and depictions, and people acted like it led down to here. You see this going on. There's no pottery there, and people have all this stonework where, in a modern day, you really try to think of it and you say, well, this, stoneware is after pottery and ceramics is in between and all this stuff. And it's like, no, it didn't even work that way either. But all these pieces on your right are all stone bowls, cups, and things like that. And they're all made to be less than a quarter-inch thick of stone that's there and smoothed off back from the outside and so on. I've got videos that show you how they made this, or actually there's a version where they just show how they made one of them. And they go, ta-da! People say, man, it's almost impossible. They must have had a lathe. They must have that. Well, they had kind of a lathe, but it's a crank thing, and hooking it up off of a tripod kind of thing that's like a pyramid kind of deal, holding on to it and then taking and putting it around. Strange thing, though, they show people using clay to stick it in spot so they can do it. And if they're not using clay, then what did they use for that spot? Well, it looks like they made little donuts out of stone that grip the other piece until it's pretty much done. and then they chip the outside real carefully and sanded it to the point that it's real smooth, but to where it's just a small, you know, thickness without trying to break it. Again, you can look at the thinness of a lot of these pieces and stuff in here, and it looks fantastic. But could you imagine some of those pieces being kept for thousands of years and end up being those pieces that show up in Egypt, and that's how they've been taken to perfection, and weren't necessarily built last week. All of that. Some of it could have been passed down from family to family. Am I going to give it credit for going, 4, 5, 6,000 years worth of time? It's possible. It's possible, but definitely the technique that's going on here is the technique that shows up in earliest Egypt. And this also shows you that connective. And the Natufian people and so on. So it starts to be a little multi-connected, and all of a sudden, instead of getting a little line from here and here and here, you get this strong line coming from these people. And it shows up in Sumer too, and then Sumer shows back up right at the start of Egypt too. So there's this line and line thing, but that's not really for the scope of this video. But we are going to go into a second part on this because there's a lot of pictures, and I haven't just let them run. I've tried to show you some of these things, but look at the amount of pottery that's here. And now I'll tell you, that's not it. That's one of the tables. And so here's this pottery that we were looking at before, and you can see how it's scratched under and so on, and the symbology that's been shown here. And so you realize that's actually stoneware work. And then you have this belt buckle thing in the top right hand corner. I don't know exactly the size of it, but apparently it's a belt of Orion. It's a power belt, so on. Were people using this? Was it used in ceremonies? What was going on with it? A lot of it will have to be with conjectures. And of course, anytime archaeologists get with this, anytime they find anything or buildings or whatever, it's religious and it's ceremonial. And people have made jokes out of that. Look how this stuff on the bottom left is a bluestone, much like we think of the bluestones that are found in quarries hooked up to Stonehenge later and everything, and how that is a little different than the darkened cookstone that they re-scratch into and make the black on white stone, if you will, or scratched back through to white stone that they have dyed in a way. And there's some wasps. There's still that wasp thing going on, and it's real prevalent. So here's a little closer look at that crab walking thing, and if you look at it, you can tell that it's two ibexes or antelopes facing away from each other, almost butt to butt, with those long horns that are going on there. So that's not what that is. And then those are perfect circles that are on this thing too, and people have made the comment like, that's perfect circles. And you hear about, oh, a perfect circle. Well, there's perfect circle inside a perfect circle inside a perfect circle inside a perfect circle inside a perfect circle. That's amazing. So there's a lot more going on here than people would probably even want to give credit for, even if they're looking at it. And then, of course, you have to have this idea, like, what's going on with this wasp? He's got a star for an eye and a star for a shoulder. Like, the shoulder of Orion's real important, all these things. Here's a bowl that's cut out of. So it looks like what they did, too, is that when they found a exceptionally colorful stone, they tried to work it. But due to the ones that they used, regardless of color, it looked like they had already well been through the fact of, no, you can't really do that. When you get anywhere close, it just breaks, to the point of stones that they can use. And then you see those blotchy Dalmatian and creamy, peachy, pinky, orange, and red stones that they have that's all mixed in Dalmatian conglomerate that they have in Egypt stuff. And you can find people that maybe there's a reason that you only find this fancy stuff here and you don't find anything that's real good, because they kept it and took it on from there. We don't find too many things there, but whenever I did my video on Natufians, they show some pottery ware that's stonework that's worked just like that. And so there's the connection. And whenever I first showed that connections, I'm not sure anybody was trying to academically say, these are these people or these people. In fact, well, Gobekli Tepe and all of this place we're talking about here wasn't looked into enough to even make the guess, I guess. Here you see other holes drilled in the side of this, saying that one time there was a pot lid on the top of this, and cords ran across and everything else too. And yeah, it was cracked, so it was left. So this is one of those ones that's made a little nicer, but it was already broken, or who knows what. to be in the little till that filled over this spot, which is nowhere near a hump that really would stand out to the mind until the people that had already seen these other sites, and they went, yeah, that looks like something. Lo and behold, it predates. I believe at this point, this Kortic Tepe is looked at as being within the oldest or the oldest site of these 11 that's been found so far, but they're not finished dating any of them. In fact, Gobekli Tepe, they're dating what part they've excavated, not the other parts. Is that younger or older? What goes on here? There's a lot of symbology that goes along with their ideas on when what is, but then again, if they're doing this from raw, as they find these other sites, they're going to realize that it didn't work quite like that, because here's some of this symbology here, and it does date before, so that makes more sense to go this way than that way, if you follow me. It hasn't been done just yet. So let's go on to part two as we look at these crosses that are over here, and this cross symbology that apparently dates 12,000 years old. What does it mean to the people back then, and these cross-headed people and so on? Perhaps people saw something ancient in the sky and so on, and give some thought to that. Let me know what you think down below, and we're going to go to part two. It's in your top left-hand corner. We'll see you there.